Welcome to Ego Radio. We get you in the minds of creatives and entrepreneurs who are breaking ground. It's easy to make a hit, but it's hard to build a career. How do you stay fresh and curious with your art, work, and life? That's what we're here to find out. This week, you will be tuning into a conversation with Dennis Grishnin. He's a cinematographer whose work speaks for itself. I mean, seriously, I'll leave some links in the show notes. Check that shit out. He's worked with artists like last week's feature, Nilo Blues, Lovell, and Ren for short. He also kills it with the commercial work. He's done some stuff for Apple Music, Airbnb, Topshop, the Raptors, Canon, and so many more amazing companies. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Dennis shed some light on how he went from shooting like promo videos for clubs to doing sound design and like sound work on set. I don't know if sound design is the right word, but he was a sound guy. He was a sound guy on set, to saying fuck that shit. I want to pick up the camera, picking up like a regular old Sony A7S, going in on that, and then diving in, copping a red, copping an RE, and like getting really reds and REs if you're not in film, or like this is the shit they make movies on, you know. So really going from where he started to where he's at right now, and his approach to bringing out the emotion in a scene to match with what the director's going for, whether that be for a music video, commercial, a piece of narrative work, you know. So great conversation. I'm excited to share it with y'all, and with that, let's dive in. My name is Ethan Cabral. I'm a filmmaker based out of Toronto, and this is Ego Radio. So how's your day been? What's been going on with you?
It's been good, man. It's been chill. Yeah, honestly, today was actually, I fired off like 3 gear lists, which is great. Like, I don't know, it just, it felt weird. Like today was chill in the sense of like, I sat in my backyard, made myself coffee. It was like easy going, but all the while I was like doing the kind of work I would normally do if, things were actually moving right now. So yeah, it just felt great. And I guess it's kind of cool to see what going back to work is going to start to feel like after all this. Before it was just like roll out of bed and oh fuck, I got to get back to work now and do stuff. But now it's just like, I don't know, there's like no rush. There's no sense of urgency anymore. You know what I mean? We're not bogged down culturally by this idea that we got to get going. Everything's at a much more digestible pace.
Yeah, no, I definitely know what you mean. For me, it was like when quarantine first hit, I felt like whatever pressure I was like putting on myself to perform at a high level, just gone. Not because I didn't want to strive anymore, but just because I was like, okay, like the whole world's on pause. I can take a little break. I can, resume, like catch myself, see where I'm at. And it was wonderful because then I was able to approach my work from a much more like zen, calm place, right? And
yeah,
so you can actually appreciate what you're doing rather than just like seeing it as a step to get to the next thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's it's been nice. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, man. Like I think other than like the occasional work conversations, I don't really have much going on in my days. Like sometimes I'll go out, just kind of spend some time outside if the weather's nice. And I don't know. It's I have these like, I don't know about you, but I have these like phases that I go through. Like sometimes like I'll be in a reading phase. Sometimes I'll be in like a really deep research phase. Some days I'll just be really sociable and like I just want to talk to a bunch of people or talk to friends. And so I don't know. It's kind of strange. Like I don't really have. I have like routines in the sense of like what I like to do in terms of like making breakfast and things like that. But then in terms of like what's the purpose of my day today, it's just it seems to be like all over the place right now.
Yeah. I kind of split it up. I started like, because there was nothing else to really like adhere to in terms of like, oh, I have to see this person or I have to do this shoot or whatever to make my schedule. I just kind of like, I'm like, okay, Mondays are for the podcast, the rest of the week, like focus on whatever other, like, whatever like short film I'm working on, music video, whatever. And so it was really easy to, once I just decided, I'm like, okay, this day, all I do is this, right? And then it's like you can artificially create that structure, right? That's kind of what I started doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think the routine of not having to go somewhere is really huge right now. Back in the day, you'd have like offices to go to, or
This guy
you know what I
said
mean?
back
Like,
in the day.
yeah, I know, right? Back in my day, it's silly to say, but I think even just having, like, again, even just like being able to step outside your house and knowing that you are
Yeah.
going somewhere with purpose,
Mm.
it makes the day feel that much more defined. So when everything can be done at home, which is great, don't get me wrong, it's very relaxing, like you said, it's very zen, and you feel like you're a lot more in control of your day, and how you approach it. At the same time, it also seems like a lot of like social norms and rules have changed, and so it's kind of up to us to reframe how we spend our days and how we approach what our sense of purpose is. But yeah, I think even just like
Which
the
has
crazy,
been so beautiful for,
it
right?
is.
I
I
think
think
so.
I think it is like, it's
It's
again, it's just
tough though. It's hard also. It's hard because
it's,
it forces you to really take a look at what's.
yeah, it's daunting because, like, it's not like we asked for this, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure we've always complained about, like, oh, why can't we just do this stuff from home? And it's like, well, here you go, now figure it out. So I think that's just
Yeah,
kind of what
yeah.
it is. But I think as time goes on, everyone will kind of start to understand what works for them. One thing I think one thing I've discovered about myself more than anything else is I really do prefer to still be around people. It's like you could do so many things for a living and you could do it from home, but I got into
Hmm.
film because I like being on set with people. I like being
Yeah.
present in physical space together and figuring this out, tackling the problem at hand.
Yeah, I've been
So
seeing a
when that
bunch
can
of
get taken
articles
away from
come out
you,
about how it's like, yeah, there's gonna like having like calls replace like commuting into work is gonna be a huge thing for like different businesses, this, that, that. And I'm like, listen, like calls are great and it's wonderful that it's so easy to hop on and like talk to people and it feels you can really get a sense of like they're there in front of you, facial expressions, all that, but that does not replace that in person, like body language,
oh,
like
it doesn't.
seeing people, smelling people, all
Literally,
these
yo, you're
tiny
right.
things that you're like, why do you like, why does it matter? It matters, man. It
Yeah,
matters.
it does. It absolutely does. It's the basis of our reality, of the foundation of how we exist. Like, even I've noticed, even like small talk is so hard now. Like the first few times, yeah, it's crazy. Yo, like the first few times I've stepped out
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
go do whatever it is that I gotta go do, like the first few like 5-10 minutes of a conversation is always like, what you've been doing, how's it been for you, how are you holding up, whatever. But then
Yeah,
after that,
yeah.
it's like you're exhausted. Like there's nothing left in the tank. There's almost this awkwardness, and because everyone's so much more quieter and self-aware, there's none
Yeah.
of that kind of awkwardness where like you're doing something while talking. It's like, no, you are there, you're present, you're talking, and then once the conversation's done, you're like, oh, well, there's not much else to say. It's so strange. It's happened to me like maybe the first 3 times I've stepped out to go, like, see somebody, or to go get to work, and seeing them for the first time in months. But yeah, that was a strange experience. It's when I first realized that isolation really does take a lot out of you, and
It
you
changes your
don't.
brain, right? Because you're not like
Yeah,
you're just not thinking about it.
you're not sharp. Yeah, you're kind of dull, and you don't even realize just how much small talk people really do throughout a given day when they're out. So yeah, it's been very interesting. But I think everyone's also very understanding of it. It's like, it's not like this is just you. This is just kind of the state of things with everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So moving away from quarantine talks for a little bit, I do
Sure.
want to go over your story, how you
Yeah.
got to where your interest in art started, where your interest in filmmaking started, how you got to where you are today, why you're doing what you're doing. And then after that, I definitely want to dive into kind of how you approach your work like currently. And
Mhm.
I'm sure that's changed over time from the start to where
Yeah.
you're right now.
Dude, it's even changed just even in the last few months, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I think like as a kid, I've always, like, for as far back as I can even remember any kind of memory, I've always been glued to a TV. Like that, I can definitely
Mm.
recall. Like it doesn't even matter what was on, whether it was a cartoon, a TV show, a movie. I just, having some kind of visual stimulation has just always been a part of my life. And for whatever reason, I can never even understand why. It's not as if I wanted to necessarily be a writer or a director or an actor, though I did probably felt like I did want to be involved in these things. But I didn't have this conscious decision that I was going to be a filmmaker or work in film. I just really enjoyed watching and being entertained. So fast forward like into like my late teens and early 20s, I'll be honest with you, I kind of sort of drifted through life. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'd gone to university for a year, dropped out, spent time kind of just like working odd jobs, and eventually that kind of led me into like the world of music, the world of like nightclub life and electronic music, and I just kind of fell in love for a few years. And it's not that I fell out of love with film, but I just kind of set my sights on wanting to produce, wanting to work in the recording arts, maybe be an engineer, work my way up to producing my own stuff. So I went to school for audio engineering at Travis, which is funny. Like I live in like the area that it's in. It's like right up the street from me now. So it's kind of funny how life goes in full circle like that. But yeah, so I did that for, it was like a 1 year, 12-month program. And it was interesting because like I felt like I was really good at what I understood technically, but the artistry side of it really did not come through for me. And I knew that there was just something I felt about working in that space that I just I knew the logistics of it, but I didn't really have the artistry, and I could feel it. And so the only thing I could really do with that was channel my knowledge into sound for film. So I actually started working on, you know, little short films and corporate jobs and commercials as a sound guy for like a couple of years, maybe a number of years.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, and the funny thing is,
I was not expecting this origin story.
no, dude, it's funny because most people are like, they come from camera, they come from lighting, they come from, you know, the usual kind of like places before they go into wanting to be a cinematographer. But yeah, I came from sound, oddly enough.
Interesting.
I wasn't huge like by any right, like, you know, it was just like little odd jobs here and there, but it was the one and only avenue in which I could actually make money at the time. Because if you think getting into film is hard, the music industry is just a whole other crazy ball game. So yeah, I took that knowledge, I parlayed that into working in sets as a sound guy. But you know, obviously that's not what I really went into audio for in the first place. So I kind of felt starved creatively. So it's like, you know, I'm doing this, but I'm not really happy, and I don't really know what's gonna like fulfill me now. And for better or worse, I don't know why I just bought a camera. Despite the fact that I had never really had any interest in like camera technology or photography or anything. I had money, and my friend showed me this one video of like this dude walking along like the coast, and it looked like blue hour. It looked really nice. And then he asked me, he's like, "What time of day do you think that was shot at?" And I was just like 8, 9 o'clock, like dusk. And he's like, that was midnight till 2 a.m. And I was just like blown away. I'm like, how is that even possible? And he shows me this camera, and this is like 5 years ago. So this was the A7S Mark I when it first came out. Like the first
back when Sony came out with like sick low light, and everyone was like,
yeah, exactly, right? Everyone was still on 5Ds, right? As far as like of what I knew about cameras, and this camera just came out of nowhere, and everyone was still hesitant on it, right? Because it's like Sony color, people didn't really know what to think of it. But all I saw was, wow, this thing could see in the dark. All right, cool. I want to buy it. Like, you know, drop a few G's. Why not? You know, like what's the worst that can happen? And the cool thing about that was I had a lot of friends in the, like, again, like the nightclub industry, and they did a lot of like, you know, event videography, and just like, you know, I knew a lot of people who worked in that world. And when they found out I had a camera like that, they were all just like, yo, like, you want to come out? Like, well, we'll get you on stage. We'll get you drunk. You know, you just come and shoot some stuff. Even though I had like zero experience shooting anything. I was
they were just like the homies. So they were like, come through, whatever.
Come through, right? And again, like I was really into that scene. So it's like a lot of the times there were like DJs and artists that I'd be like so into. And I'm like, so I can go in for free. I'd be on stage. You're getting me drunk, and I can play around with this camera. Sure. Sounds fun. So yeah, I did that for a little while. All the while I was still doing sound for like, you know, smaller productions and things like that. But I really kind of started to fall in love with shooting and just kind of playing around with cameras and refining my skill set from there. So I had a bit of a choice to make, like around late 2015, 2016. I had already quit my part-time job. I'd started freelancing full time. And I just took any and all jobs I could. So like within a given week, I could be on set doing sound one day, followed by going to shoot this event the next day, followed by randomly helping my friend to AC on something, followed by another sound gig. Like it's just like all over the place. And took any and all jobs I could to pay bills, because at that point I just decided, I'm like, you know what, I'd rather try freelancing than work a part-time job that I have no desire to be in. And things started to go well, but I realized at that point, I'm like, well, I can't continue doing this because I'm not really getting better at anything. I'm just kind of doing a bunch of stuff just to make ends meet. So I took a risk and I just sold all my audio gear. I bought a bunch of other little bits of camera equipment. So like lenses, I bought a Ronin at the time, the Gen 1 Ronin, which that thing was god awful. Broke down on me like 3 times.
Ronin, for anyone listening, is just basically like if you're not in film, it's a stabilizer for your camera, basically.
Gimbal. Yeah, exactly. It was actually like Movi had already, like Freefly had already put out the Movi at that time as well, but the Movi was like a very professional tool. Like you needed to be like a tech to know how to run it. Like you have to like connect wires and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
It was like the first kind of more prosumer, I should say, friendly gimbal. Like you just, just know how to balance, know how to tune it, and that's it. It's ready to go. So I think that's.
So you sold all your sound gear. You bought all this camera gear, and you're like, all right, I'm specialized in this. What I'm doing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So for the next like maybe year and a half after that, I just like shot anything that I could. Again, like events, corporate stuff, little music videos. Just did anything that I could to continue honing my craft into the direction of video and eventually cinematography. And then, that ran for a little while. And I see, the thing is, my philosophy back then was I was only as good as the gear I had. And it was tough for me to get out of that mindset because it was working for me. It's like every time I bought something new, things got better. And when things got better, my jobs got better. Right. So it's like, it was like this formula I had. It's like, if I get this piece of gear, it'll take me to the next level. So the next thing for me after that was to, hello, Ethan?
Yeah, I'm there.
Hey, sorry, you froze for a bit. My next thing after that was to upgrade my camera. So I sold my A7. I saved money throughout the year, sold my A7S, and I bought a Red. And so I had the Red Scarlet W for about a little over a year and a half. And things got better from there. I started to get more commercial work. Music videos started to get a bit better. And then that ran for a while. And then I just decided, all right, I'm going to sell the Red, buy an Alexa. So I sold it, sold my Ronin, bought a Movi. Anyways, it was just like a lot of like flipping of gear, buying new gear. Until eventually I just kind of got exhausted of all of that. So, and then, I don't know, like I can't really say when things really kind of changed for me. It always just seems like I went through these kind of little phases and cycles of like, I'm into this, I want to learn it. Okay, I've learned it, moving on. And I think maybe only in the past, maybe year and a half, have I really kind of started to step out of that mindset of I am only as good as the things I use, and start to think about, well, what are we, like, what's the story? What are we showing the audience? Like how are we supposed to make people feel? Okay, I can't use this. Cool. What else can I use? Really starting to think kind of outside of what I would call my capabilities, and really trying to break the boundaries of what I would convince myself to be my limitations. Yeah, and I think somewhere around like beginning of 2019 is probably when it really started to change for me. I think I started to get offered jobs that were a little bit more creative, where I could really sit down with the director, figure out what it is that he or she is looking for, whilst also bringing an element of myself into it. And
so it took you a good few years to move from pretty much being in sound as a purely technical person to realizing, okay, this camera shit's kind of cool, to then grinding that out for a couple years. And then being in a position where now finally someone's like, what do you think about this? What creative twist do you want to bring to this?
Exactly. Like, I think it's interesting because like I definitely think I've had a very unorthodox come up in this industry. Like, again, like most people come from camera, they come from grip and lighting usually. Like, that's how they learn the trade. And I have a seed for people here and there. I mean, honestly, I could probably maybe count on my hand how many times I've gripped. Like, I've never even really worked G&E all that much. But I think where I really learned from some of the best DPs I've got to work with was my operating. Like, I think because I put so much time into owning all this equipment, being really good at setting it up fast, being really good on just running things myself and capturing things in the moment before they're gone. I think my biggest strength at the time moving into DPing was operating. Like I think operating and composition, like I would say those
Because
were
you just
probably,
had that experience. Didn't matter that it wasn't operating like whatever Reds or Lexas. You had
yeah,
experience shooting, setting up quickly, getting the shot, being timely with it, professional
yeah,
with it.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
got you,
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah. So, and I think that afforded me the ability to work with a lot of DPs who I could then study their approach, study their demeanors and temperaments
So
on how they.
you were like first ACing, which if you're not in filmmaking, first ACing is like first assistant cameraman, and
Yeah.
so you were first ACing a bunch of people at this point, and just
I
like
wouldn't even say, I mean, I did here and there as a means of helping people out. And occasionally I did get paid, but
yeah,
where I
yeah.
really got paid as a crew member more than anything else was operating. Like I just kind of jumped straight into operating because of what I
Got
was
you,
already.
got you.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, like I definitely have AC'd a fair amount. But I never really like, that's the thing too. It's like,
So when
I
you say
never,
operating, you're pretty much like, so a DP wants a shot, you come in to operate the gimbal, you come in to,
yeah, especially if there was
yeah,
gimbal work involved. Yeah, for sure. A lot of
yeah,
people
yeah.
knew me for gimbal. And it just general became operating or kind of some kind of support operating. Yeah, and it afforded me the ability to be on sets with really experienced, talented people and learn their craft their way. And lighting too. Like where I really learned lighting was watching other people light. And I've seen, at the time I was seeing, giant grids overhead with multiple lights running to a board, all being controlled on the one hand. And I was seeing dudes who had a mirror, sunlight, and a lamp. And yeah, literally, right? And like
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
this job specifically, this was in Italy over a year ago. And I got brought on for gimbal, and our DP, like we had some lights on the truck and stuff, but like the sun was just like, it was just right coming through the balcony. We were in like this really big, spacious library at this person's home. And I offered him, because like it was a very stripped down crew, so wherever I could help, I did. I offered him like, do you want me to go grab the light mat or something? And he's like, you know what? Give me a second. He literally runs to the bathroom, grabs the mirror right out of the wall, and just like runs out to the balcony, just positions it so that it just bounces this streak across the table on the other side of the room, and then just pops a lamp right behind him to give the space and him just a little bit of like a kicker. And that was
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's how we lit the scene. So it's like I got to see both spectrums of how DPs worked. And I think it's really important because like, yeah, there will be times where you're in a big soundstage and you have to light 4 cars in a big white studio. Or sometimes, yeah, you'll have nothing and a little window in a room, and you've got to plot out and figure out, okay, what time of day is the sun at the right angle, and where can we position the talent to get the right look? And I think both approaches are incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect segue into something we were chatting about on the phone on Monday.
hmm,
Uh, it's really about, like, you can talk about style and you can talk about developing a look and whatever, but
hmm,
especially as a DP, you're catering to the needs of the story. You're catering to the needs of the environment that you're in at that time, right? So
hmm,
it very quickly becomes about mastering your craft, right?
hmm.
And that is, if you cut to the core of it, that's what it's always about, right? Mastering your craft,
Absolutely,
so you
absolutely.
can get what you're looking for in any environment, in any situation, for any story.
hmm Yeah, it's and I think that's half the fun of it too. It's like,
Yeah,
again, like you give me all the money in the world to do whatever it is that you want, and I'll do it. Like, I mean, that's always fun to like plan and design and really work out to the exact T of what you're looking for. But half the battle sometimes is getting into a space, and after weeks of planning and all this stuff that you've written down, sometimes you have to get ready to throw out the rule book and just go, you know what? Okay, we can't do this, but let's do this. This will work. This feels great. And I think any good cinematographer is going to have both of those spectrums honed properly. I think, it's not just lighting, camera too. It's like, you can have like all the nicest dollies and cranes and drone shots, but I think a good DP is also someone who can pick up a camera and understands the fine nuances of handheld work, and when to move, when to hold, when to inject a little bit of shake, when to really try to hold still. um, yeah, I think all of that really just kind of ties into who you are as an artist and as a person, and the experience of watching how other people create.
yeah. Well, tell me about like your experience now, like coming from pretty much just like, and I think that's how a lot of us get into it, right? Like just like you buy like a Sony DSLR, you buy some DSLR, and you're like, all right, this is fun, and then you
Yeah.
take it a little bit more seriously, and you take it a little bit more seriously, and you
Yeah.
keep following that thread.
I think,
And now you're in a place where where you're getting these jobs where you get to insert your kind of creative direction into the cinematography, where people are asking you for your opinion, and you're working on projects where the art really matters. It's not some nightclub video, it's not some bullshit corporate video where there's like some dudes with a tie on, like struggling to read the same 4 lines over and over again. I've been there. I know what you're talking about.
I think that whole culture might be dead after all this too, to be honest with you. It's like, who's shooting corporate videos when you're not even in an office anymore, and like everything's just this now, you know? Like,
it's quite possible.
Kind of nice, which is kind of nice because I guess it opens up the opportunity for different kind of work for people. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's the core of everything I've come to learn about myself as a DP, and even just as an artist, is exactly that. It's you know, what separates you from other people, and the work that you do, and your approach, and what it comes down to.
What is it that's unique that you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry, are you asking me what is it?
No. I'm like, okay, like reiterating what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, and I think part of that is also learning to discover who you are as a human being, as a person. What experiences have you had in your life? Where do you come from? Whether it's geographically or culturally, you know, what insight into the world and into humanity do you have that's different from others? And that's just like anything else, like just like learning how to use a camera, or how to light, or how to direct or edit or whatever. It takes time. It takes time and effort, and you know, learning from others as well as learning by yourself. I think there was a phase in my life where you know, my work was getting better from both a technical and I guess an artistic standpoint, sort of. But there was something inside of me that felt off. Like every time I'd look at my work, and I mean, maybe this is also just who I was as a person. I've always, for a long time in my life, been very, very critical of myself, and very hard on myself, just as a means of pushing myself to the next level. But obviously, that's not the healthiest way, especially when it comes to art, to approach things that way. And I just remember for about a good year, I was really just unhappy with my work, and not just like the corporate stuff and like the stuff that I was doing for money, but even just like the artistry side of things, the stuff that I was putting time into, the passion projects with directors and friends that I was doing. I was very unhappy with it, and I couldn't really understand why for quite some time. I don't know if it was because I just wasn't there technically yet, or if there was just more of the job that I needed to learn about that I just hadn't really foreseen. But I think what I started to realize is, I mean, your art is always going to be a reflection of who you are. And I think what I was really trying to say to myself is, I don't like who I am as a person. You know, like if I wasn't happy with my art, then that just meant I wasn't happy with myself. And that meant digging further into who I am, and the life that I live, the people who I surround myself with, the thoughts and behaviors and patterns I have in my head. And I think it took me a long time to kind of, dig myself out of that recurring theme of, you know, being hard on myself, always striving to be the best, you know, typical ego shit. And starting to learn how to be just more gentle with myself, and understanding that everything is a process, that everything is about growth, everything is about trying things out and failing, and that it's okay to fail. About making changes to my life and to my relationships with people and to how I look at the world. I think there was like,
I'd love to, if you're comfortable going into it, I'd love to, because it sounds like there was some sort of a breaking point from where you were looking at the world one way to where you realized, okay, this isn't working. Between your life, between your work.
I don't.
Was it more of a gradient, or was it like a switch?
Probably definitely a gradient. Like I don't think that there was this one defining moment where something snapped in my head. I mean, I have had those moments where something clicks, and then that makes me think a different way, and then from there on out, it takes me on a new path, and that happens quite often with me. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't say there was this one moment in time where everything just changed for me. It was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
process. It definitely took some time, and some patience, and some challenging on my part. But I think what just ended up happening over time was I started to say yes to things I normally wouldn't. I started to try things out that normally either worried me or scared me for one way or for one reason or another. And I think in the process of doing so, I started to discover, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, or oh, this person's not really what I had expected them to be. Like I think in the process of changing my habits and myself as a person, I therefore ended up changing my work. And so now when I look at my work,
Mm.
it just feels different to me now. Now, this could also be all very arbitrary. Like maybe that's just how I feel towards my work. But if I show you one frame from 2 years ago and one frame from now, you might not even see a difference. Like I
Yeah.
really,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't even say if it's even really there or not or apparent, but it definitely does feel like that for me. So
Hmm.
I think the work and my life as a whole, it's cyclical. There's
Definitely, and I can really relate to what you're saying because even personally for me, I went through a period in 2018 where for about a year I created things, but I wouldn't really finish them. I'm talking about my personal
Mhm.
projects. I was doing a lot of work for clients, but like I couldn't really enjoy what I was doing for myself. And I kindly like I reached the point where I was like, do I even like this anymore? Like is this something I really enjoy? And
Yeah.
then I took I started university at that point, and I took I just, like I moved out. A lot of things were happening, and I didn't have time to devote myself to making stuff the way I would have liked to.
Mhm.
And then I reached a point where I dropped the ball on a project, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh shit,
What did you do?
there.
How'd you drop it?
I just didn't give it the energy that I would have liked to.
Mhm.
There was a trip that I had going on. I was going out to Vancouver. My parents had recently moved there, and in going out to see them, which would have been the only opportunity I had to do that for that whole year, I wasn't available on some key dates for an extended project that me and a few friends were working on.
Mhm.
And I was in a tough situation, but regardless, that to me was like a point where I was like, oh shit, okay, like this is something I really care about. I can't stand to see myself giving it not giving it the energy that I
Of course.
really know that I need to. Uh, and yeah, similar to you, I wouldn't say that it was like that was like the one. I say that was kind of like the last straw for me, and I was like, okay,
Mhm. It's
let's figure
it.
this shit out. And that's when January I started working on this podcast, and then April uh, I dropped season one, and it was just an inquiry into okay, what is it that enables a sustainable creative process, right? What is it that enables someone to continuously come back to their work and be excited about it, to come back to it with that same vigor that
Mhm.
got you interested in it in the first place, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Totally.
I very much like sympathize with what you're saying, and
Yeah. I think
it's
it's hard. Like it's so honest. It's almost a little too honest, and some people have a hard time accepting that. Some people don't really take the time to stop and think about what is it that's driving them? What is it that's actually motivating them? Or is it coming from a place of, great passion and love in their work, or is it coming from fear of
oh
being
dude, you hit it on the
right?
head with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, totally. And I say that because I definitely feel like that was my problem for a long time, really. And there's no shame in coming to terms with the fact that maybe you just aren't in love with what it is that you're doing as much as you thought you were. But the importance is that honesty with yourself and others, in your work, in your passions, in everything that it is that you want to do in this world. And it's just so funny because like it's not quite so literal. You know what I mean? Like success can be literal, right? Like viewerships, money, clout, whatever. Like, like these are quantifiable figures that we can then use to measure
Plus
success,
five clout, yes.
right? Like, yeah, exactly, right? Like, oh, X amount of likes, X amount of,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
metric that
yeah.
you find it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, all those things are quantifiable. They're so literal, but the gratification of what it is that you're doing, it doesn't come from the literal. It comes from the feeling inside, and that feeling
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That feeling can be overcoming challenges and obstacles. That feeling can be coming together with friends and colleagues to make something that you're passionate about. That, you know, that feeling can come from discovering a part of yourself that you never even thought could exist. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think the most incredible part about what we get to do, and not even just in filmmaking, I think in the process of making art itself, is that as you make your art, you also get to discover a part of you deeper and deeper and deeper. And then in turn, you can then learn to channel that and then present that for others to then get a sense of who you are through your work. But it's all cycles. It's all just like these phases that you go through of creation and destruction over and over. Like, even when I think back to it, even like my obsession with buying gear, like all I was really doing was creating an opportunity and then destroying it. Like when I bought my most recent cameras, like my Alexa, it's an older model and it's a bigger, fatter version. And it's older. And a lot of people were really hesitant in when I was telling them that that was going to be my next investment, because the first thing they said was, how are you going to put that on your gimbal? It's too big. And I told them, well, that's the point. I don't want to. And they're like, well, how are you going to do work? And I'm like, well, I don't want to work as a gimbal operator anymore. So I created an obstacle and a limitation for myself so that I could then learn to overcome it and take on different jobs that didn't require me to be on the gimbal and focus on different avenues in my career.
It's that courage to force yourself to pursue the next opportunity that you know you really want, that you know you really wanted, right? Like even like when you sold your sound gear and you made that jump, I'm sure it wasn't a perfectly smooth transition. That was still
yeah. I mean, it wasn't like, it's so strange. Like I think so much of what we think is going to happen sometimes is just, it's all in our head. It's crazy. It really is. Like you can convince yourself of the craziest things sometimes just out of fear and ego. Like like when I sold my sound gear, again, people thought I was crazy. They're like, that's like half your work. Like, why would you do that? And, you know, cause I knew, well, it's an investment into my future, cause this is not a future I want to continue. But if I take that money and I put it towards other things and I start pushing myself to go into this avenue in this direction, then I have no choice. I have to walk that path now, because I've essentially destroyed the other path in front of me.
Yeah, it's that story of like the general that brings their troops to the island, then burns the ships and says, all right, you fight here or you die, right? Like that's
exactly. Sometimes like human beings are incredibly resilient, and if there's one thing that we do, it's we adapt. Whoa. Yeah. That just happened. Like we adapt, you know, we adapt our environment, our circumstances, and the limitations that we create for ourselves. You know, even like something as simple as like living a life of minimalism, you know, some of the reasons people do that is because when you don't have so much around you, you pay attention to other things, right? And things in your home don't become so literal, you know. I think part of the reason people are like afraid of losing their home sometimes it's because they have so much stuff within their homes, not just the people that live in there. But when you can pack things into a few bags and get up and go, then suddenly you can just go anywhere in the world, and it's so much easier to do that. So yeah, I think part of my growth has come from this idea of every time I've excelled or succeeded in something, I would always have this urge inside of me to go, okay, now what? What's next? How do I destroy this so I can create something else? Shooting film was like that for me too. There was a phase in like 2018 where I was shooting 16 for a bit, because I just, again, like I had the urge. I saw people were doing it. It was cool. I bought it was like a Super 16 modded Bolex online and shot a bunch of stuff with it. Had my fun, but you know, it had its limits too. And once it reached, I sold it. And again, a lot of people were like, why are you selling it, dude? You're killing it. It looks great. And I'm like, yeah, but it's like, again, I hit this kind of stagnation, and I need my next thing. I need the next thing that's going to propel me.
So it sounds like you've never been afraid to push aside what you've gotten comfortable with to chase something that's a little bit more unknown. That's a little bit more dangerous if you choose to frame it that way, right? Or it's a challenge that brings you that new excitement.
And I love that you said that. Like, you're right. It is how you frame it too, right? It's like everything is perspective and how you look at it. It's like, don't look at it as like, if you do this, you're going to lose this. It's about what you're going to gain. And I think that's how I always try to approach it. There always was a bit of fear and panic within me, for sure. But I also think like it can be good sometimes to use that as your driving force to propel you forward into the next thing. If you're not afraid, then you don't care. That's the way I look at it, right? It's like, people are usually afraid more than anything else because they care a lot. And I think I wrote off my fear for a long time, and it worked in some regards, but it can also be very dangerous. And I think having the foresight to understand when it's necessary and when it's debilitating is very important too.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you break it down, everything in your life can be split into two lanes, right? Like there's fear on one side and there's desire on the other side. And you're kind of walking this line where you're running away from things you're afraid of, chasing things that you desire. And then it's even a little bit contradictory in nature, because you fear the thing that you fear not getting the thing you desire just as much as you desire it.
Yeah,
and, then and it's like
you feel like it devalues your worth if you don't succeed, or if you don't achieve it either. It'd be just because you went out to do it. And like it's a crazy thing, man. Like again, like I've learned that what we do in art and our careers and in our life in general, it's not as literal as we've always thought it was. And as you get older, you just start to realize like there are really no answers to whether something's going to work or not. All there is your will and determination to get it done. Yeah. So I mean,
I want to like just rest on that for a moment, because I think it's like it's so easy to it's a little corny, but it's also very easy to give into circumstances, right? It's so easy to give into, because there's always going to be some bullshit that gets in the way, right? Whether it's a pandemic or whether it's like whatever, it's like, what do you really want? If you really want it, you'll figure out a way.
Dude, that's exactly where I'm at right now. It's like everyone's like, people have been watching that I've been like going back out to shoot, and mind you, they're very small. It's like one of my shoots that I did a couple of weeks ago, it was just me and my friend. Like I handled everything, camera, whatever.
And people are starting again. Again. Like small 3-5 people sets.
Yeah. And some people are like, yo, how are you doing this? Like how? Like, not like specifically, I guess they're just like trying to wrap their heads around the idea of how is it that I'm going out there and doing these things. And I just tell them because I can, because I will. Like, I don't know what else to say. It's like, I spent my time in quarantine, just reflecting and doing my own thing, and working on myself and trying to figure out where is it that I want to take my life in the next step. But at the end of the day, I do what I do because I have an itch to do it. And eventually I just stopped saying I wish, and I just started saying I want. But I totally sympathize with how people are feeling right now, and I get it. It's not an easy time to know what you want. And some people are relishing the break that we're getting right now to kind of recharge and reevaluate. But I've always been the kind of person that once I hit something, like once I feel something inside and I know this is the right thing to do, this is the next thing for me to do, I get right to it. Like there's, I can be very indecisive, but once I've made a decision, that's it. That like we're doing it. There's
slow to deliberate, but once it's go time. It's go time.
That's the way to do it, man.
Yeah. Well, so tell me, like, so now when you step onto set and you're thinking about, or when you step into pre-production and you're thinking about bringing a story, bringing a concept to life, right? What's your approach? What are you thinking about?
As a DP, I think, and I don't think it's really changed for me much over the years. I think my core principle at the end of the day is, what is the audience meant to experience? Because that's the whole purpose of entertainment and art. It's to experience something and to reflect upon it, and to, if it's good, I mean, one would hope if it's good, then it should also change you in some way. And so whenever a director sits down to tell me whatever it is that their vision or their concept is, my first question is, okay, well, what is the audience meant to experience? Through what, I guess, lens, in a way, are they meant to look through when they're watching this piece? And I kind of build it from there. So, if the concept is a little bit more straightforward, then, the conversation just kind of becomes like, okay, well, what's the look that we want to give it so that it kind of enhances what the visual experience is supposed to be. But of course, if there's meant to be more of like an emotional narrative emotional element to it, or something that's meant to make people feel a specific feeling, then it becomes more about how you're building that in the edit and in the script and in the performances. Like I used to be the kind of person who just kind of concerned myself with how things look, and beyond that, everything's out of my control. And now I don't really like doing that anymore. I don't like doing that anymore, just because, I think it doesn't matter what position you work on set, having an understanding of
The entire process from start to finish.
it's so pivotal. Like if I frame a shot and I have no idea how you're going to cut it to the next shot in the edit, that's not good. Like I can
That's
give
not
you,
good for you. That's not good for the editor. That's not good for the director.
I could give you a series of great looking shots, but if they don't coincide together, if they just don't feel right, and I mean, you can make the argument that's what the director is for. You're supposed to guide me. You're supposed to get me there. But it's just going to be so much easier if I already know what you're looking for, if I understand your vision, because not only am I going to give you what you ask for, but then maybe I'm already, as an extension of you, looking for things that's going to help enhance that anyway. And I end up showing you something that you probably didn't even know you wanted, but now you're like, oh, I love this. Let's do that. Like, a perfect example, actually, like when we talked about this on Monday, I know you mentioned how much you like the Top Shop thing I did with Angelica. And part of how the visual for that was constructed was, she showed me some references. She said, I really love this. I love how this feels. I'm like, okay, great. We can do that. And then her question was, how wide can we go? And I was like, well, we've got a 16 in the lens set. Is it 16 wide enough? It's a pretty wide lens.
Yeah.
And she's just like, can we go wider? And I'm like, well, we could. I mean, I guess so. So, I was looking around. I'm like, okay, we can get a 14, because anything wider than that, the lens is just gonna be so huge and so cumbersome to work with. So we got a 14 mil, and we chose to shoot in 4x3 because on an Alexa, a 4x3 mode allows you to actually gain more top and bottom without cutting the width of the sides. So it allows you to get closer to somebody's face, which gives you a closer perspective while still keeping them in frame, which on the wide lens looks great. And so what ended up happening on that shoot, we discovered on literally on the first scene of shooting, was that what was supposed to originally be elements of the video, this crazy wide aspect, and then cutting in all this coverage, we ended up just loving the look of the 14 and the feel of it. And so much of it just ended up being shot on the 14. And I think when you watch the final edit, like 50-60% of the video is just the 14 mil. And I think that's just like, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't want Ange to just tell me like, oh, I want it to just be wide. It's like, well, I want to understand what you're looking for and what you're trying to go for, because then I can kind of help look for you, and together we can go, wow, this feels great. Let's find more of that.
So what you're doing when you're having this conversation is you're building kind of a visual language, right?
Mm-hmm.
To convey whatever tones and emotions you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
How does that come to life for you? Is it mostly because when I say visual language, I mean like you look at a director like Wes Anderson, the way he works with his DP, he builds a very specific visual language. That's just a very obvious example.
Yeah, I
mean,
like
even like David Fincher, very similar deal, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, like those two directors are also just like, they're very, they're very talented dudes, and they're very particular. Like when you look at someone, like when you use Fincher as an example, like it's a very extreme example, because Fincher, in a lot of ways, is kind of like Kubrick, where he just has a great understanding of exactly what he wants to see, and people are just there to help execute that. Like I remember watching this.
It's less of a back and forth on set process, and more of like I see it done in my head. Let's make it.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's necessarily like a right or a wrong to that. But that's just like that's their process. Like there's this. I remember there's a BTS of like Panic Room, like the making of Panic Room with Jodie Foster, and Fincher. Like while the set, because I don't know if you know this, but other than one shot at the very end of the movie, the entire movie is all one build set. That house, and even just the opening on that street, that's an entire house built in a soundstage. And so there's video footage of like Fincher walking through the construction of this home before it's even being finished, like before it's even finished being built. He's saying, okay, so I want camera 36 inches off the ground here. It's going to go through there. So I need an alcove built here so the camera can slip through. Like he just knows. And which is incredible. I mean, like that's awesome, and that's why his movies feel the way they do. And some directors are like
that makes sense.
And then there's other directors who can't even tell you what a 35 mil is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And those are the, you know, the actor directors or the editor directors, or you know, the directors who come from a different background than the more technical side, and they have their own way of working, and therefore you as a DP have a different approach to how you can serve them. I've worked for directors who literally tell me, okay, we're gonna go to we're going to the 50 now, which is normally sort of like a kind of like a call for me to make.
For you,
But
yeah, yeah,
if I
yeah.
trust the director knows what they want and they understand what being on that lens is going to do for us, then like I'm not gonna have an ego about that. I'm like, cool, we'll go to the 50, unless something kind of catches my eye and I go, hey, we should probably consider this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. And then yeah, some directors are just like, I just want to see this.
Yeah.
Like literally, they'll just give me a size, and then it's up to me to decide, okay, how, you know, how much do I want the subject separated from the environment? How much sense of movement and scale do I want? And then from there, I'll kind of choose what lens I want to be on. So that's just like one example of like, you know, how I would kind of go about that. But it really just depends. Yeah, it always depends on who you're working with.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Because everyone's found their way to that role in a different way. So the skill sets and the, you
Yeah.
know,
And,
the tool set that they're bringing to that is going to be slightly different every time.
yeah, and I think what the most interesting part about it for me is that over time I've discovered that like I can actually be a different creative on set when I get to work with so many different people. Like there have been jobs where like on the day, you know, we'll be shooting it and like it won't be what I would typically do, like if I had all of the choices available to me. And I'll see it on monitor and I'm like, okay, it's working. You know, I don't know if like I would say this is my most favorite visual thing I've shot, but like it's working, and as long as they're happy, then I'm happy. But then you see it come together in the edit and you go, oh, okay, I feel it, I get it. You know, it's not about it always necessarily looking the prettiest. It's did it serve its function for the director's vision. So I think the cool thing is the times where people just let me play and do whatever the hell I want. You know, those are fun because then I just get to see my visuals that I just you know, I got to craft, and I get to almost see a piece of myself in that work.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there are times where I see a piece of myself, but through the extension of somebody else in that work. And I think that's really cool too. You start to discover
A piece of yourself.
right? Like it's kind of cool. I love it. It's almost as if someone
Yeah.
took me, but rewired something in my brain or changed my emotions towards something. And I think that's really cool too. I mean, it takes a lot of graciousness and humility to let go of what you would normally want to do in service of what the
Yeah,
director.
well, talk to me a little bit about that, because I know we were having a little conversation about the concept of ego and
Yeah,
how having a big ass ego does not serve your art.
it doesn't. It really doesn't.
What
Yeah,
is
I
your
mean,
process in realizing that being like
um,
some fuck ups?
yeah, I think like where it kind of came about was like I think going into every job, especially when I was kind of still new to this,
Mm.
because I cared so much, because I had a deep desire to succeed and excel and make the best work that I
Yeah,
can make, or at least
yeah,
the
yeah.
best in my eyes anyway. I always kind of came into things with an expectation, and part of that was good for me in a way, because it meant that I could be as prepared as I could be, and obviously preparation is everything when going into a production. But then the problem is that when you walk in with that expectation, it's really hard to let go of what it is that you've been thinking this thing is going to be for weeks on end. And then by the time it's over, I mean, it could
And
be
you've
a
kind
great,
of become identified with that. What
right?
you
And
see,
so when
yeah.
you don't achieve it, or when someone doesn't let you have that,
It's
it
like
just,
you feel like you're wrong. Like
yeah, exactly, literally. And it is ego, but it just feels like gears are starting to grind inside of you, and you're trying to convince and almost manipulate people into doing what you want, but it's not working. And it's just, it's, yeah, I really, it was challenging for me for a very long time to be able to identify that that's what I was doing inside, and to also learn to let it go and understand that it's not about you. Like there's a sea of people. I mean, depending on the size of your crew, sometimes there is literally a sea of people all there in service of one thing. And you are just, I mean, you are an important part, but you are not the part. It's not about you. It's about this thing. And you need to be there and give all of yourself to somebody's vision. And I think once I started to learn that, I started to let go of having any expectation walking into a job. And in the process, I've got to really discover elements of myself that, again, like I never would have really done had it not been someone guided me along in that direction. And now I look at those pieces of work and they're some of my favorite pieces. And it's because I realized, like, wow, like in that moment, I let go of who I was and I got to discover somebody I didn't even think I could be.
Damn. I think that's a gorgeous place to wrap this up. Dennis, thank you for taking the time to come through and have this chat. I'm a big fan of your work. You do some great stuff. And,
holy shit, it's actually been an hour. Oh my God.
Man. Yeah.
Yo, that flew by. That's crazy.
It flew by, right?
Yeah, cool, man. But yo, thank you, dude. This is actually this is technically my first ever one of these ever. Like, I don't think I've never done a podcast. I've never done a panel or anything like that. So
hey, here's to many more.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, we'll just cut the recording there. And so, yeah, that is all for this week. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you in another fortnight with another episode featuring another amazing artist from the city of Toronto. And honestly, like, we're gonna be expanding. We're gonna get some people from London, UK, and we're gonna get some people from Vancouver, and I wanna the California, you know. I'm excited to keep this podcast going, to keep sharing new conversations with you. So thank you for tuning in. And if you made it to the end, you're amazing. Like, I would kiss you if you were here. Like, don't matter who you are, right? That's love. I respect that. Thank you for sticking through. Credits, time for the show credits. Shout out to Jacob Martinez Neme for editing this episode, and Lance Free for making the beats, Matt Bajan for our current graphic design, and as always, Ethan Cabral, me, yours truly, your host, for producing and hosting the show. So that is it. I'll catch y'all later.